We see 50 people in a circle, standing, facing each other, but unconscious. One woman wakes up first. She tries to step off of her circle. The room buzzes. She tries again. The room buzzes. Nobody else is awake. She tries to touch someone's shoulder. The room buzzes. Someone tells her to stop moving. They can see us. Who's they? We, the audience, don't know. Then everyone wakes up. They start to call for help. One person steps off of their circle and are instantly killed by a strange machine in the middle of the room. One man turns around to assess what happened and he's also killed. Somebody suggests that if they just stop moving, they'll all be fine. Nobody lift up your feet. Nobody touch anybody. We'll all be fine. A strange noise starts to hum through the room. Whum, whum, whum. And then the machine in the middle of the room kills the last man who spoke. The room erupts into chaos. 2015's Circle is a psychological thriller inspired by 12 angry men. 50 people are forced to play this sadistic and deadly game hosted by the aliens who just invaded Earth. The rules of the game are simple. Every minute or two, someone has to die. Either they choose, or someone volunteers, or the machine in the middle of the room will choose randomly. At first, the question is, how do we stop what's happening and get as many people out of here as possible? But as the rounds proceed, and their own likelihood of surviving each round gets worse and worse, the participants start to turn on each other. Who can we sacrifice to get a little bit more time? Who doesn't deserve to live at all? Is there anyone who, on principle, should make it to the final round? Psychological movies, whether they're psychological thrillers, romances, horror, or whatever, make arguments about what people are like. Characters represent archetypes, and they act accordingly. This movie is rich with ideas that could be explored in an essay, but I've seen very few analyses of this movie. There was one philosophical analysis I found, which I will link in the description below. That is to say, I considered several themes to dedicate this video to. For example, the moments when characters contradict their earlier behavior. Around the midpoint of the movie, characters call for volunteers. Is there anybody who wouldn't mind stepping forward so someone else could live? And after a couple of rounds, everyone claps eyes on the soldier. And he says, no way.
I was in Afghanistan for the past 2 years, risking my life to keep the rest of you safe. I'm not fucking dying in here.
Later in the movie, as people start to go after a little girl, Katie, and a pregnant woman, he goes out sacrificing himself to save them.
You're fucking pathetic, man. You'd kill a kid to save your own life.
Yeah, that's right. I want to live just like you.
No, not just like me. I wouldn't do that.
Or consider the banker, who said that they should consider whether or not someone has kids in their decision.
I'm just saying, if you don't have children, maybe you should volunteer.
Only to turn on the little girl.
We don't even know what kind of a kid she is. I mean, what if she's a miserable brat?
To him, kids aren't precious, but the people who care for kids are. So does that save the pregnant woman? No.
There are plenty of babies. I mean, people have lots of babies. The world has enough single moms on welfare. She might be unemployed.
It's all about what's convenient to him to keep him alive. One could also write an interesting essay on the transition between social and antisocial behavior. Characters start off trying to work together. Whatever information they have or figure out, they share without thinking.
No, it's not them. Are you guys seeing this? The light's on the floor. You see it move?
No, I don't see anything.
What lights? What are you talking about?
Look at your hands. When you move them, it changes the floor.
They're trying to stop this, they're trying to work together. That said, our first deceptions start pretty early on. For example, one man who was chosen to die next starts telling everybody that he saw the aliens.
And I saw them.
Well, what did they look like?
Well, they were big and black, dark green maybe, and wet. And they spoke too. It sounded almost like Chinese.
Chinese?
Yeah, Chinese or Japanese maybe.
Another man tells everybody that he's standing next to his wife in order to curry favor.
Isn't it possible that they just made this whole thing up?
No.
Why would they lie?
To survive. Nobody wants to kill someone's wife or husband, especially right in front of each other. They just made this whole thing up to get our sympathy.
They're still hoping to stop the machine and get out of the room alive, but they're willing to lie in order to draw fire away from themselves. The shift to true antisocial behavior starts when they theorize that if they get rid of the right people, then the machine will stop.
Maybe we're supposed to figure out who's good and who's bad.
This draws them into a witch hunt mentality, seeing sinners everywhere, desperate to find a scapegoat to pin the blame on. The final turning point comes when they realize that there's just going to be one survivor, and they either have to use an egalitarian model to ensure that everyone has an equal chance of getting out alive, or a model that privileges Katie and the pregnant woman. They become ruthless. Information is weaponized. Theories are kept to oneself. Factions throw each other and their own under the bus again and again. So how long do we stay social creatures? Well, just as long as we're better off with somebody than without them. I also thought about making this video about which prejudices will get you killed. Some of the best moments in this movie are when someone's acting really bigoted and the whole group decides they don't deserve to live anymore. The kid who wanted to kill all the old people first, the homophobic lawyer who wanted to kill the lesbian, the atheist who called all the people who believe in God idiots, the banker who goes out screaming at people to kill the little girl. But not everybody who says bigoted things gets killed. There was another vocal supporter of the idea to kill the old people first, and he lived for most of the movie. And the homophobic lawyer and the banker both made a fuss about the Mexican man not speaking English and not being in the country legally, and both of them made it to later rounds too. Nobody bats an eye when the lesbian says about the pregnant woman,
she's never heard of birth control, so she gets to live.
And that's all very interesting, but I want to go deeper. What this video is about is the open-ended question of whether some human lives are worth more than others. This movie doesn't make a claim one way or the other. It doesn't even make a claim as to whether most people think one way or the other. Individual characters do, and some of them even stick to their convictions. But what this movie really does is reveals whether you as the audience think that some lives are worth more than others. And it does this with how it plays with tension, with the different decisions that characters make, and how the audience is going to feel about those decisions, and with how it ends, with who gets to survive. You, the audience, will root for different characters based on your values, but you have no idea whether your values are shared by the people in the movie. And that's the same position that each of the characters are in as well. For example, early on, a cop recognizes a guy in the circle.
I know him.
I don't know you, man.
You're a mechanic in North Hollywood. Raul Jimenez. I remember you.
What'd he do?
I didn't do shit. He's lying, man.
He beat the shit out of his girlfriend. Really bad.
Raul defends himself, saying that she deserved it because she cheated on him. And what's the cop gonna do? Shoot him? The cop confidently says,
I don't think I need to.
The group votes for Raul to die. Later, the cop gets exasperated when a black man points out that minorities have been dropping a lot faster than white people. He goes on a rant about how black people are lazy and just want handouts, and for a moment, the audience has to wonder whether he's going to persuade the crowd again. But this time he was killed. Now, you could look at these two situations as a just accusation versus an unjust accusation, but justice is subjective and it's based on our values. If we value anti-racism, then obviously the cop should die. But if we value personal responsibility, and there are a few other characters who do, then what the cop is saying makes a lot of sense. There's actually one moment in the movie where I don't side with the majority values-wise. I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, so when the atheist starts to throw a fit, I see where he's coming from. He's afraid of their moralizing and of their witch hunt mentality. What if their appeals to God influence their decisions in ways that are going to get him killed? He tries to persuade them to his way of seeing things by pointing out that the machine in the center of the room has a lot more influence on them right now than God does.
So you want to have faith in something? Have faith in this! Okay, because that's God in here now, right? That's God. right now in here. So pray to him.
Now, he does this in a really rude way, and he's killed, essentially, for calling the other abductees idiots. But it underlines the fact that justice is subjective. And if you're going to use some kind of values-based system to figure out who lives and dies, then it's frightening to think that you're being held to somebody else's values that you don't share. And this brings us to the central question of the movie. Are we all equal? Some characters think that some lives are obviously worth more than others, and other characters think that we are all obviously the same. Still others fluctuate between the two groups, either because they lied about their values or because they didn't really know their values until they were put to the test. A system for measuring human value emerges. Everyone defaults to the baseline, and then are assigned higher or lower value by the people around them. In one metric, being elderly gives you low value. In another, women and children have high value. Doing porn gives you low value. Hard work gives you high value. Immigration status gives you low value. Having a family gives you high value. These categories are debated and used at different points in the movie to save someone or eliminate another. Sometimes characters who are aware of how people around them are likely to judge try and manipulate the metrics by which they're going to be judged. For example, the lawyer tries to weaponize family against the lesbian. He describes himself,
41, I've got 2 boys, a 18-month-old baby daughter, married to the same amazing woman for 12 years. That's it, your turn.
She summarizes her life.
I raised my 4 younger siblings during my father's heroin addiction and mother's clinical depression, then attended Vassar under a work-study scholarship before serving in the Peace Corps for 3 years in Nepal, and then returned to the US where I've worked for a nonprofit ever since.
Notice how he uses his second family to gain value, and she uses her family of origin and her work to gain status. When it comes out that she's a lesbian, he asks the group,
Do you think that this is someone worth dying for?
after all, she's sinned. Maybe if they kill her, then all of this will stop. For a terrifying moment, we don't know which way people are going to decide. But then, the lawyers voted out, and we're introduced to a new category that I like to call, your time is up, buddy. Basically, when you try to condemn somebody using values that are not shared by the majority of the people in the circle, your time is up. The homophobic lawyer, the racist cop, the ageist kid. Now that isn't to say that everybody who tries to manipulate popular opinion is in this category. Lots of people are judgmental but don't end up here. In fact, in many scenes, it's the minutiae of watching people turn on each other that's so entertaining. But still, your time is up, buddy remains a useful category for analyzing the social commentary of this movie. It comes out that just about everybody has a metric by which they judge others. Early on, the grad student is the most committed to the idea that all people are equal. She scolds the young man who would sacrifice the elderly, and she translates for the Mexican man so that he can join the conversation. But once Katie and the pregnant lady are targeted, the grad student changes her mind. See, just like there are some people who are in the fast lane to Eliminationville, there are other people who are just too precious to kill. When the banker asks the pregnant lady what she does, how does she contribute to society, the grad student says,
Who cares what she does? She's pregnant. That's what matters.
Later, she and the Mexican man work together to save Katie and the pregnant lady by exposing to any remaining doubters that those two are being targeted every round. First, the graduate student sacrifices herself, opening the Mexican man, now without a translator, to a direct attack by everyone else in the circle. Now, she knew there were people in the circle who would use this opportunity to attack one of the girls, and when he gets put in a tie with Katie, he steps off his circle to sacrifice himself and save her, proving to everyone left that the girls are in the most danger of everyone in that room. No gray area remains. No one asks about jobs or felonies or children. The only question that remains is whether the girls have enough allies to protect them against the egalitarians who will attack them every single round for their perceived high status. See, believing that all life is equal only works as long as everyone shares your belief. If somebody else is seen as having a higher status, you just received a death sentence. A few selfless characters form a block to protect the girls against those who will target them every round. The way this movie ends doesn't so much make an argument about human nature as it reveals the viewer's values, where they stand on all of this. In the final round, there's just the girls and one guy, the same guy who first spotted the danger they were in and who's been helping them survive this whole time. He offers to Katie that he'll step off his circle at the same time as her so she doesn't have to go alone. At the same time Katie steps off her circle, he votes to kill the pregnant woman. He's the survivor. If you think that some lives are more precious than others, you won't like this ending. I've seen people go so far as to call him the villain, but I don't buy that. It's the aliens who put them in this situation, who killed 49 people, who are the villains. Anyone who gets abducted is a victim, and anyone who gets through it is a survivor. And I guess that puts me in the other camp, thinking that all lives are equal, because I don't begrudge him having survived. You know, I actually share his relief that the ordeal is over. I mean, I was surprised by what he did because he spent the whole movie lying about his values and trying to save the girls, but I don't have a problem with what he did to survive. Now, does that mean I'd be equally happy no matter who got out? Well, no. I'd be disappointed if one of the Your Time Is Up buddies got out, but they didn't. The survivor was just a guy who did a messed up thing to survive a messed up situation, who used his powers of observation and other people's values and prejudices to hedge his bets, and in the end he survived. Unlike certain other characters, he didn't ask if the pregnant girl's boyfriend was in prison, and he didn't tell the kid she was a miserable brat. He just did what he needed to survive, and I think we're good here. Circle asks us some hard-hitting questions about what kind of people we value and what the relative worth of a human life is. It does a great job of drawing the viewer in and having them confront their own beliefs based on their reactions to the decisions made on screen. As I was looking through reviews of this movie, I saw that a critic at Ain't It Cool News described it as not a fully fleshed out concept, and I actually agreed because I enjoyed this movie so much. This sequence of events isn't the only way things could have gone down in this room. Because the movie takes place above Los Angeles, most of the characters have a Western psychology, and that's not the only psychology worth exploring. I tried to look up whether this movie had been translated and what the international reception was, but I couldn't find much information about an international release. The thing about psychological movies like this is that if it's going to work in a very different culture, you'd have to rewrite large portions of it and reshoot the whole thing because psychology is literally different in other countries. Let me give you an example. One of the criteria for a mental disorder is that the symptoms actually have to be causing problems for the person exhibiting them. So if your ADHD is making it impossible to study, then it's a disorder. But these symptoms don't cause problems for everyone who has them. For example, Hank Green calls his attention deficit hyperactive because for him it's not a disorder. It doesn't bother him. And the reverse is also true. A lot of things that seem really normal to Americans seem really weird abroad. For example, in a lot of collectivist countries, certain American parenting practices look kind of neglectful. I mean, who would let their baby struggle to try and feed themselves when you can reach over and help them? So since different cultures have different psychologies worth exploring, what might happen in different circles? Would elderly people be privileged above younger people because they're the living embodiment of history and culture? Would women be sacrificed first or encouraged not to vote? Would more people refuse to vote altogether, or would fewer people be willing to step off their pedestals? I would love to see a version of this movie that took place in different places or even different times, because while the questions this movie asks are universal, the answers aren't. One version of this movie might be set in mid-1700s France, where people have a concept of voting, but keep getting tripped up over the idea that everyone's vote counts the same. See, it's counterintuitive to the version of democracy that they thought was fair, or at least fair enough to constitute a stable-ish government, for now. At the end of the day, it's a clever premise that tells an interesting story. It doesn't have to offer universal insights into human beings to do that. If you guys haven't seen it yet, it's on Netflix, it's short, it's worth a watch. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below, or let me know what psychological movie I should watch next. I have a craving now. And if you enjoyed yourself here, you can like this video, you can subscribe, you can even give me a tip through Ko-fi, link in the description below. Thanks for watching.